Hi, everybody. Just getting my stuff organized here. We'll just wait another few seconds to start. And hopefully the air conditioner won't be giving too much feedback today. Okay, so namaste. Happy Sunday. Thank you for joining me. And today we're going to reflect on meditation as art and art as meditation, part one. Yes, there is so much good information on this topic. I have to do it over the course of 2 weeks. Um, Most people know, but my major in college was fine art, and it was mostly in drawing and sculpture. There are many who teach, but it is the rare person who earns the title as teacher. I've been incredibly fortunate in having some of these beings influence my life. One who is very dear to my heart is Professor Ruben Kadish. He was my sculpture teacher I had at Cooper Union for 2 years. I could do a whole series just on him. He was quite the character, larger than life, at least to me. And I didn't truly appreciate the gifts that he gave me until later on. He has passed since, but he is still influencing people, and that is a true teacher. One of the biggest takeaways from his classes was his frankness. When he would kind of grumble at us, he'd be like, "Huh, you think you're going to be an artist in 4 years? Because maybe in 60 if you're lucky." He goes, "Just make stuff." So here it was, pretty prestigious college, and he's like, "Oh, just make stuff." He was a burly 86-year-old man by the time I entered his class, and under that gruff exterior was a heart of gold who saw things. He observed. He was pretty uncanny that way. And I was really naive and did not realize his place in the art world until I left college. Actually, he would be telling us stories, and while we're there in class, sculpting in clay, you turn to a fellow student and ask, "Did he just say Modigliani was an asshole?" Yes, he knew them. He interacted with them and got in trouble with them. He and Jackson Pollock were actually kind of known as the bad boys of the art world in the 40s. This is my beloved teacher. um, he wouldn't critique your work unless you asked him. I braved it after a few months in his class, and he came over to my stand of sculptures, kind of looked, goes, "Your sculptures look like Smurfs." And he turned and walked away. I was extremely hypersensitive as an art student, and the thing is, I kind of smirked. I smiled at that comment because, one, I knew he hardly ever said anything directly to students, and two, if he did say something, it was because he cared. And I always knew that innately about him. So, with all of his wonderful stories over the years, his bottom line was always make stuff, keep creating, keep creating. All artists of note, that is their common denominator. Van Gogh did a painting every single day, when in Arles. Matisse created even when he was in a wheelchair. He'd move his cutouts on the floor and manipulate them with his cane. May sound familiar. Okay, it's basically the ethic of a practicing yogi. Practice, sit and meditate. Good day, bad day. Practice. Abhyasa is the Sanskrit word for practice, and it's mentioned throughout the Yoga Sutras. Practice, practice, practice. You just have to put in your dues. Okay, practice is never in vain. even if it's filling your karmic jar in, minuscule increments. Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote The Outliers, the book The Outliers, about 10 years ago, I believe, he did research on that magic total of 10,000 hours. Doing anything, absolutely anything, for 10,000 hours makes you a master at that activity or craft. He was, for example, he was actually brave enough to state that, like, the Beatles actually weren't geniuses. The fact that when they were in Germany as teenagers, they were playing almost 5 hours every single night. Okay, like, or at least almost every single night for how many years straight? I think it was like for 5 years. Okay, it honed their craft to the point where they were like a fine-tuned organism that played as one. They were masters. And it then created room for their creative process to pretty much explode. Okay, in fact, when they were at Shea Stadium, the screaming in the stadium was so loud that they couldn't hear each other or the instruments, even with those high-powered speakers. So they just wung it. They didn't have a choice. And the thing is, the performance was flawless because they were so in sync with each other that it didn't even matter if they could hear each other or not. So it does kind of lead into meditation is not a religion, but it creates a way of being in the world that is more sensitive. Okay, J. Krishnamurti states, being religious is being sensitive to reality. Henri Matisse believes all art worthy of the name is religious, be it a creation of lines or colors. If it is not religious, it doesn't exist. If it is not religious, it is only a matter of documentary art, anecdotal art, which is no longer art. The public is spiritually lazy. Okay, that is from Matisse on Art by Jack D. Flam. Okay, so as Americans, we have a funny reputation around the world as being either like incredibly driven or incredibly lazy. Okay, we have the most billionaires than anywhere else in the world. We are born with the American dream, right at our fingertips, if we want it. Okay, work hard, strive for it, and you will attain it. We also have a lot of things handed to us on a plate and expect that in all aspects of life sometimes. Diet to lose weight. Can't I just take a pill? I worked at a health food store. I heard this every single day. Sit and meditate. I can't do that. I tried. I don't have time for that. It's even better. Okay, meditation is about practicing being, not doing. As Americans, going inward is not something we're comfortable with because it's not in our culture. We have things thrown at us: TV, internet, YouTube, movies. We're spoon-fed. It is said, it's actually, I think, really sad that, there are actually workshops now and that are designed for connecting with nature. We aren't comfortable with being quiet and being ourselves and with our thoughts. Okay, as we learn to meditate, we start hearing our brain, we get overwhelmed. Okay, meditation freaks out most people. You're not alone. That's actually the norm. Okay, so back to art. Art is also about having faith that something beautiful will emerge eventually. Okay, meditation is not an easy path, just like any art. Okay, for the yogi, monkey mind takes over or stagnation happens. There's no progress on our spiritual path. Okay, for the artist, writer's block has settled in, or the muse has abandoned me. It's still an artist carries on. Okay, still we carry on. Okay, Stephen King writes every morning for a few hours. Monet painted hundreds of haystacks just to study light and how the light hit it. When people have this perception of artists as lazy, flaky people playing with paint, I'm always shocked. It's the tenacity of artists it's amazing. It's comparable to the tenacity of the monks that are able to discipline their mind to sit in the snow with wet towels around them and heat their body temperature up to dry out the towel and melt the snow that's around them, all with their highly focused mind. Okay, people think, it's lazy, just sitting there. Most people can't even sit through a meeting without fiddling with their phone, looking at their watch, or picking their fingernails. Okay, we're kind of like the dog from the movie Up. I think most of you might have seen that. Whenever someone was talking to him, usually in mid sentence, he'd go squirrel, just like go running off after one. Okay, so writers have their writer's nook, and musicians have their studios, and artists have their studios. You have your seat, okay, your sacred space, whether it's on a zafu cushion, in a chair, or on the mat. And your seat needs to be comfortable. Okay, if you aren't comfortable, that is where your focus will go. Okay, if your foot falls asleep, all your brain is going to do is go in a loop. My foot's asleep, my foot's asleep, my foot's asleep, my foot's asleep. Okay, there will be no meditation happening. Okay, just your brain screaming about your foot. So you have to get comfortable. And if possible, be upright. Okay, if you're in a hospital bed or unable to sit upright, just do what you're able to, work with what you have. Okay, being upright, okay, keeps your spine in alignment and the energy flowing upward in its natural movement. Okay, scientifically, sitting upright, the ribs can expand more naturally during breathing, and cerebrospinal fluid will flow more evenly around the spinal cord and brain, keeping these areas more alert. Okay, sleeping is not meditation. Okay, unfortunately. It will happen at the beginning. You might kind of do some head bobs. Okay, don't beat yourself up over it. The brain will begin to learn to relax and focus without going unconscious into sleep mode. Okay, so with that, let's do a brief meditation. Okay, so find that comfortable seat, that comfortable upright seat, your studio, your sacred space. And I'm going to strike the singing bowl intermittently. And with each gong, bring your focus back to the breath, moving in and out of your nose. Okay, just keep bringing it back whenever you hear the gong. Okay, so close your eyes. Breathe deeply. Follow the cool air of the inhale up through the nostrils. Follow the warm air of the breath out of the nostrils. Come back to the breath. In through the nose, out through the nose. Come back to the breath. Open your eyes. Okay, that was a little over 5 minutes. What I dream of is an art of balance, of purity and serenity, devoid of troubling or depressing subject matter. An art which could be for every mental worker, for the businessman as well, as the man of letters, for example. A soothing, calm influence on the mind. Something like a good armchair which provides relaxation from physical fatigue. It's another quote from Matisse. I am at odds with how most artists are and were mentally tortured or, and not able to find that equanimity as Matisse did. You can't look at Edvard Munch's, The Scream, and think he was trying to create serenity in the viewer. Okay, Modigliani was an addict. Robert Frost, an alcoholic. Gauguin, a pedophile. Picasso, a misogynist. Frida Kahlo was in hideous physical pain most of her life, and Van Gogh was mentally ill. I feel like Matisse was the only grounded one that still made world-changing art. So just a lot of questions. Does there have to be that element of pain, even torture, to create such breathtaking beauty? Okay, when one steps into the realm of finding peace or equanimity, does that driving creative force leave, you know, with the suffering? Does creating beauty and suffering go hand in hand? I'd like to pontificate on if Van Gogh was able to find a mental sanctuary, what would his work look like? Um, do the people who bring beauty into our world have to suffer? Um, does it make an artist appreciate beauty differently? Okay, does it make them see the world through different eyes, more sensitive? And I sure don't have the answers to that. If anyone else does, I'd love to hear it. Okay, in the same interview from that quote by Matisse, he talks about how he wants to create peace in the viewer of his art because he himself is in need of peace. Okay, what about, El Greco and Rembrandt with their dark, brooding paintings? El Greco, is a tormented soul who exteriorized his torment and put it on canvas. Now, with meditation, and yogic beliefs and Buddhist beliefs, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Frida and Vincent, couldn't escape their pain, but took their suffering and turned it into something, beyond exquisite in the world of beauty. Wabi sabi, it's the Japanese word for art that takes a flaw, like a crack in a sculpture, and makes it beautiful by filling it with pure gold. The flaw then exalts the piece to this beautiful, inspiring art. Most of you probably know Leonard Cohen's famous quote, the cracks are how the light gets in. Okay, instead of trying to run away from our mental anguish, why don't we try embracing it? Okay, just sit with the anxiety, depression, heartbreak, pain. Okay, on NPR last week, there was a segment about a woman in her 20s who suffered from debilitating, beyond painful endometriosis. She told the story of how she was in the airport waiting in the customs line, when she had an attack. And it was so horrible that she actually froze because the pain was so bad. Um, Someone helped her over to the side by a wall, and then they asked who they could call, for her. And her first thought was her father. Um, they're from an Indian family, and he grasped the first tool he could think of just to help his daughter out of pain. And he proceeded to guide her through a color meditation. Defining the pain as a color allowed her to grasp onto it. She could deal with a color. Okay? The pain had a definition now that she could control. Okay, how beautiful is it that a father is consistently able to help his daughter through a traumatic experience using guided meditation? Um, you can also use a similar technique. It's reminiscent of pratyahara, the pulling inward of the senses. Okay, so you're going to create your artist studio, okay? Create that comfortable seat again. And prepare the perfect environment. Sit up tall, shoulders relaxed, deep breaths in and out, okay, through your nose, and close your eyes. Find a spot in your body that has an ache or pain. We tend to try and ignore the pain, okay? That doesn't work because this is your body's only way of communicating with you when something is wrong. It's the body's way of saying, hey, look over here and check this out, okay? There's something going on. Okay, you need to pay attention to something over here. So that is exactly what you're going to do now. Okay, breathe deeply. Okay, breathing gets you in your body, more in touch with anything physical you're feeling. So where is the ache or pain? Is it between muscle tissue? Is it up against the bone? Is it in a joint? Is it a dull ache spread out over a larger area, or a searing one-pointed type of pain like a balled up marble? Hey, what is it? Is it an ache, a throb, a pain, a jab? Maybe words like raw and acidic, might help identify it. What does it feel like? Does it have a texture? Is it rough like sandpaper or corrugated cardboard? Is it smooth like a marble? Maybe it even has a temperature, like hot and searing or icy cold. What does it look like? What color is it? It might be pretty. Does it have a sound associated with it? Sometimes migraines have like a low drumming sound to them, or perhaps it's like nails on a chalkboard. Listen to it. Does it have a smell? Does it smell rotten or insipidly sweet? It might even have a taste linked to it. Now you have identified where and what this is. It's much easier for your mind and body to release something that is identified rather than just some amorphous thing. And releasing takes time. It might take a few sessions like this, or who knows, maybe it'll just release with one session. Start with just the edges. Can you breathe toward this ache or pain and see if the edges can loosen up with the breath? Maybe little fragments will break off and you can release them, out of your body on the exhales. Can you breathe the breath a bit further into that ache or pain? Sometimes it's totally ready and it fully shatters apart and you can breathe it out of you. Use the exhales as a vehicle to release whatever your body, mind, and spirit don't need. Most of the time it is a slower process. This round, maybe a few cracks will begin to show in the ache or pain. Use the breath to create even a little bit of space through this area. It might help to visualize that ache or pain as a woven fabric, and the breath starts loosening up the strands. The outer strands might start unweaving and floating away on those exhales. Inhale space. Exhale any fragments. Inhale into that ache or pain. Exhale anything willing to release. And just stay with this for a few moments. Make sure you thank the ache or pain as you release it. Okay, it was there for a reason. it did have a purpose, and if it doesn't feel acknowledged, it will come back until you've learned or gained insight to the reason why it was there in the first place. Inhale into it, exhale, thank it, and send it on its way. After showing gratitude, you now need to fill the space that's left behind, so the negative stuff doesn't have a chance to creep back in and take up residence again. So breathe into that clear, open space now. Feel the edges where the ache or pain used to inhabit. Fill it with the life-giving prana of the breath. You can move on to a different area in the body that may have a trouble area, or stay with this one if it's well anchored in there. Again, some areas need numerous or even consistent sessions like this to keep them at bay. Okay, open your eyes. Robert Henri wrote the Art Spirit, this book. And there's a quote in here that he said about drawing that can be him talking about the breath being your tether cord during meditation. He states, the grip of a line. Note how a line takes hold. It hooks the vital parts together. It binds the composition. Look well at the model and look well at the drawings of masters, and you will see why I speak of the hook of a line, which grips. So come back to the breath and let it hook you. Just always keep coming back to the breath. And after many of the intense 3-hour workshops I would teach, like the hip opening, the heart opening, and that, the emotions would get blasted open, and layers of emotional guarding would get peeled back. And after those workshops, I would tell students to plan on a very, very chill evening, because they were raw. They were raw physically, spiritually, and mentally from all the work they'd done. So when I read this passage by Natalie Goldberg, it's from her book, Living in Color, I was tickled because, well, when you hear it, you'll see why. Because it sums up this yogic experience that I just described perfectly. So Goldberg was viewing this artist's paintings after she had been writing for hours and hours on her own. And she states about the paintings, they comforted me, because sometimes after writing, I felt as though my face had been torn off. I had no facade to rely on for protection. I've learned to stay away from social interactions right after I'm done writing, to take long walks and breathe in the security of trees and buildings warmed by the sun. Transitions have always been hard for writers. How do you come back down to earth, down to selecting cheese and cans of soup at the grocery, after you've been out flying with angels and demons? Okay, I will end with that. Okay, next week, part 2. Okay, I will touch on sacred geometry, as in found in Chartres Cathedral in France, and how it parallels and even crosses over into the energy centers of the body known as chakras. Okay, so be gentle with yourself. It's intense work flying around with those angels. Okay, have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Hari Om Tat Sat. Take that light, joy, and beauty from your heart and extend it out into each moment and experience of your life. Thank you, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye.